17. Black Hollywood legends who took horrifying secrets to the grave. Hollywood loves glamour, but behind its brightest black legends were secrets so heavy they were carried all the way to the grave. These were icons who broke barriers, ruled charts, reshaped culture, and yet lived with truths too dangerous to reveal in their own time. What the world applauded on stage often hid unimaginable pressure, betrayal, discrimination, and emotional battles no camera ever captured. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the stories history tried to bury. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence, and turn on notifications because these are the secrets the spotlight never showed you. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was more than a superstar. She was a phenomenon. With a voice that critics called a once-in-a-lifetime instrument, she sold over 200 million records, became the first artist with 7 consecutive #1 singles, and starred in The Bodyguard, one of the highest-grossing romance films of all time. To the world, she was flawless. America's sweetheart, the woman whose talent needed no introduction. But behind the perfection was a private life filled with emotional conflict, intense pressure, and truths she was never permitted to speak openly. Growing up in a strict gospel household groomed by record executives and held to impossible standards, Whitney learned early that her image belonged to the world, but her pain had to stay hidden. The weight of fame grew heavier as the years passed. Whitney faced relentless scrutiny about her relationships, her marriage, her identity, and her personal struggles. Though she maintained a polished public persona, later documentaries and first-hand accounts revealed a far more complicated reality, one marked by loneliness, emotional strain, and the constant pressure to live up to an image that no one could sustain forever. Even those closest to her hinted at the emotional toll of balancing global superstardom with private battles she could never fully explain. Do you believe Whitney Houston ever had a real chance to simply be herself without the world demanding perfection from her every minute? It's a question that becomes harder to answer the more we learn about what she carried in silence. Whitney's struggles did not exist in isolation. Other Black Hollywood legends: Luther Vandross, Donny Hathaway, Dorothy Dandridge, Alvin Ailey. Florence Ballard also lived under the harsh spotlight of an industry that rewarded their brilliance while punishing their truth. But Whitney's case was unique because her fame was so vast, her image so tightly controlled, and the expectations placed on her so crushing that every mistake became international news. She was asked to be a role model, a pop princess, a gospel prodigy, a movie star, a wife, and a mother all at once. Yet no one seemed to ask who Whitney herself wanted to be. When Whitney Houston died in 2012 at just 48 years old, the world mourned the loss of a voice that had defined a generation. But her passing also revealed the heartbreaking depth of her private suffering. Through documentaries, interviews, and the testimonies of people who loved her, pieces of her story finally came to light, stories of immense pressure, unspoken pain, and emotional battles she carried alone. Today, Whitney stands as a symbol not only of extraordinary talent, but also of the silent burdens many stars take to their graves. Her legacy reminds us that even the brightest voices can echo with heartbreak the world never heard. Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross possessed a voice so smooth, so effortless, that it seemed to float above the world he sang about. With 8 Grammy Awards, more than 40 million records sold, and timeless hits like Never Too Much a House Is Not a Home and Dance with My Father, he defined an era of soul and R&B romance. To millions, he was the man who could express love better than anyone alive. Yet behind that velvet tone was a deeply private man, one who carefully built walls between his public image and his inner life. Luther adored the stage, but he feared the spotlight aimed anywhere beyond it. In interviews, he focused strictly on music, deflecting questions about marriage, dating, or relationships with a gentle smile that left more mysteries than answers. Those closest to Luther later shared how heavy those unspoken truths were. Friends like Patti LaBelle revealed that he lived with a constant fear of disappointing fans, especially the millions of women who saw his music as a soundtrack to their love stories. He also worried deeply about hurting his mother, Mary Ida Vandross, whom he loved fiercely. In an era when the careers of black male entertainers were easily destroyed by public judgment, Luther learned that silence was a shield. But silence comes with a cost. While his ballads overflowed with longing, tenderness, and vulnerability, Luther himself lived with an emotional isolation he could never fully shake. Luther's struggles extended beyond the heart. Throughout his life, he battled significant health concerns, including diabetes and weight fluctuations that became tabloid fodder. In 2003, he suffered a devastating stroke that left him unable to attend the Grammy ceremony, where he won Song of the Year for Dance with My Father. His mother accepted the award on his behalf, reading a message he had recorded, a moment both triumphant and heartbreaking. Despite global admiration, Luther remained intensely private, guarding his personal truth until the very end. When Luther Vandross passed away in 2005, at just 54 tributes poured in from across the world. Only after his death did close friends begin to gently reveal the emotional battles he carried in silence. Battles shaped by fear, stigma, and a music industry that offered little room for honesty. Today, Luther is remembered not only as one of the greatest voices of all time, but also as a man who poured his truth into music because he could not safely speak it out loud. His legacy stands as a reminder that extraordinary talent often hides extraordinary pain. Donny Hathaway, and devastate all at once. Born in 1945, trained in gospel by his grandmother and later educated at Howard University, Hathaway rose quickly into the spotlight with hits like A Song for You This Christmas and his breathtaking duets with Roberta Flack, including the Grammy-winning Where Is the Love? His talent felt limitless, a rare fusion of technical mastery and emotional depth that made listeners feel as if he were singing directly to their hearts. But while the world heard joy, tenderness, and hope in his music, Donny himself lived with a storm no one could fully understand. Behind closed doors, Hathaway battled paranoid schizophrenia, a condition documented through medical records, hospitalizations, and interviews with friends and family. He heard voices, suffered from terrifying delusions, and often believed that outside forces were trying to harm him. In the 1970s, when mental health carried heavy stigma, especially for black men, there were few resources and even fewer spaces for compassion. Donny worked desperately to maintain control, returning to the studio in moments of clarity and retreating from the world during episodes of fear. His collaborators often described him as brilliant but fragile, a man who carried a gift far too big and a burden far too heavy. As the decade wore on, his illness deepened. Hathaway struggled to record consistently, to tour, and at times to trust even those who loved him most. Friends recalled moments of brilliance in the studio, followed by abrupt spirals of fear. And yet every time he stepped to the microphone, something miraculous happened. His voice rose above the chaos inside him, offering clarity and comfort, even as he himself felt lost. The duality was painful. Donny Hathaway could heal others through song, but the world could not heal him. On January 13, 1979, Donny Hathaway died after falling from a hotel window in New York City at only 33 years old. His death was ruled a suicide, though questions and heartbreak have lingered for decades. In the years since, biographies, documentaries, and interviews have revealed more about the silent battles he carried, battles he never discussed publicly. Today, Donny Hathaway is remembered as both a musical genius and a man crushed by an illness the world was not ready to understand. His legacy stands as a haunting reminder of how many legends carried horrifying secrets to the grave, secrets born not of scandal, but of suffering the world never saw. Little Richard. Little Richard was not just a performer, he was an earthquake. Born Richard Wayne Penniman in 1932, he exploded onto the American music scene in the 1950s with a sound and style no one had ever seen before. With hits like Tutti Frutti Long Tall Sally and Good Golly Miss Molly, he helped lay the foundation for rock and roll itself. His high-energy piano playing, electrifying screams, and flamboyant wardrobe rewrote the rules of performance. Elvis Presley. The Beatles and James Brown all openly credited him as a major influence. And yet behind the glitter and the fearless stage presence, Little Richard lived with internal battles that the public only began to understand long after his death in 2020. His life was a tug-of-war between self-expression and the crushing pressures of race, religion, and public morality. Behind the spotlight, Little Richard struggled with complicated feelings about identity and faith. In interviews throughout his life, he spoke openly about attractions he felt from a young age. But the world he grew up in, especially the religious environment of the Deep South, condemned those feelings. Little Richard oscillated between embracing who he was and retreating into guilt, often returning to the church during periods of turmoil. In the 1980s and 1990s, he publicly renounced certain parts of his past, only to later express different views again. His words shifted with the emotional and spiritual battles he carried inside. This conflict was real, painful, and deeply human. Do you think Little Richard ever found a space where he could truly be himself without judgment from the world or from his own faith? The music industry added its own pressure. While audiences loved his flamboyance, record labels often pushed him to tone it down. Segregation laws meant he performed for black audiences, while white teenagers danced in separated sections. Despite being a pioneer of a new musical form, he was paid far less than white contemporaries who later followed in his footsteps. Fame opened doors for him, but it also magnified his internal struggles. He wanted to serve God, but he also wanted to express the joy, freedom, and queerness that shaped his artistry. Living between those worlds exhausted him. When Little Richard died at 87 in May 2020, tributes poured in from every corner of music and culture. Only then did the world fully acknowledge the emotional and spiritual struggles he carried privately for decades. His legacy is not only the birth of rock and roll, it is the story of a man who changed music forever while wrestling with secrets he could never fully resolve. Little Richard's truth was powerful, but much of his pain remained unspoken to the very end. Jermaine Stewart. Jermaine Stewart was the kind of artist who lit up a room the moment he walked into it. Born in 1957 in Columbus, Ohio, he began his career as a dancer on Soul Train, where his charisma quickly set him apart. His big break came in 1986 with the worldwide hit "We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off," a dance pop anthem that climbed the Billboard Hot 100 and became an international sensation. The song turned him into a star, almost overnight, celebrated for his smooth vocals, impeccable style, and refreshing message about intimacy and self-respect. But behind the confident performances and bold fashion choices, Jermaine carried private struggles that remained invisible to the public during his lifetime. In the 1980s, the music industry demanded a strict image of masculinity from black male performers, an image Jermaine never fully fit into and never tried to. He wore colorful outfits, moved with grace, and exuded a soft, artistic energy that made him unforgettable. Those close to him knew he lived authentically in his private life, but he never addressed his sexuality publicly, not because he was ashamed, but because the industry wasn't ready to let him speak freely. LGBTQ+ artists faced enormous pressure at the time, especially during the height of the AIDS crisis, when misinformation and stigma dominated headlines. As his career progressed, Jermaine faced challenges that many artists encounter, but few feel safe discussing. Record label changes, shifting music trends, and the pressures of public scrutiny began to weigh on him. Still, he continued recording, writing, and performing, determined to express himself through art, even as the commercial spotlight dimmed. Underneath the stylish clothes and joyful stage presence was a man who valued love, creativity, and integrity, qualities that made him beloved among those who truly knew him. Jermaine Stewart passed away in 1997 at just 39 years old, the result of AIDS-related liver cancer. A detail that was scarcely acknowledged by the media at the time due to societal stigma. Much of his personal life remained private, even after his death, leaving the world with only glimpses of the battles he faced silently. Today, Jermaine's legacy shines brighter than ever. He is remembered as a fearless performer who lived with authenticity long before the world learned to honor it. His voice may have left us, but his courage and his secrets remain part of the larger story of Black Hollywood legends who carried untold truths to the grave. Billy Preston. Billy Preston was one of the most gifted musicians to ever touch a keyboard, a prodigy whose fingers shaped the sound of an entire generation. Born in 1946, he was performing with gospel legend Mahalia Jackson by age 10 and playing organ for Little Richard as a teenager. His genius was so undeniable that the Beatles invited him into the studio during their troubled Get Back sessions, earning him official credit on Get Back, making him one of the only musicians ever listed on a Beatles single. Throughout the 1970s, Preston delivered hits like Nothing from Nothing and Will It Go Round in Circles, winning 2 Grammy Awards and becoming known as the Fifth Beatle. Yet behind the praise and applause was a man carrying private struggles that would follow him for decades. Like many artists of his era, Preston faced the harsh pressures of fame, identity, and expectation. Colleagues described him as joyful and charismatic on stage, but deeply guarded in his personal life. Growing up in a strict religious environment, he learned early to separate public persona from private truth. In later interviews, longtime friends revealed that Preston lived with profound fear about how the world would judge parts of his identity, including his sexuality, at a time when the entertainment industry was unforgiving. The weight of that silence affected him deeply, shaping both his personal decisions and professional relationships. Do you think Billy Preston might have found more peace if he had lived in a world that allowed Black artists to share their truth without fear of losing everything? The question echoes through every stage of his life. Preston also faced medical and emotional battles that rarely made headlines in his prime. He struggled with addiction throughout the 1980s and 1990s, a problem he acknowledged publicly while seeking treatment more than once. Amid the turbulence, he continued to collaborate with legends like Eric Clapton, Elton John, and the Rolling Stones, never losing the brilliance that made him a star. But as the years passed, his health worsened. Complications from hypertension and chronic kidney disease led to frequent hospitalizations, forcing him away from the spotlight he once dominated. Billy Preston passed away on June 6, 2006, at 59 years old, after falling into a coma caused by kidney failure. Only after his death did close friends begin speaking openly about the emotional burdens he carried, burdens tied to identity, expectation, and the complex intersection of faith and fame. Today, he is remembered as a musical force of nature, a man whose genius shaped modern music, but who lived with a silent weight he never fully laid down. His legacy endures, but many of his deepest struggles traveled with him to the grave. Johnny Mathis. Johnny Mathis remains one of the most distinctive voices in American music. A velvet-smooth vocalist whose phrasing, warmth, and elegance shaped the sound of romance for nearly 7 decades. With over 350 million records sold, Mathis stands alongside Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley as one of the best-selling artists of the 20th century. Songs like Chances Are Misty and It's Not For Me to Say turned him into a household name, a fixture of television specials and a beloved star of the Great American Songbook. Yet behind that polished image was a man navigating the intense demands of fame while fiercely protecting his personal life in an era when privacy was both rare and essential. Throughout the height of his career in the 1950s and 1960s, Mathis faced an entertainment industry shaped by rigid expectations, especially for a black male singer whose primary audience included millions of white American households. Record executives carefully shaped his public persona, emphasizing charm and romantic appeal while steering attention away from his private world. In a rare 1982 interview with Us Weekly, Mathis made a brief but candid comment about his personal life, one that generated a surprisingly strong public reaction and pushed him back into silence for many years. Despite the pressure, Mathis continued performing with grace and discipline. He became known not only for his timeless music, but for the steadiness of his character, humble, private, and committed to craft. He trained rigorously to protect his vocal longevity, approaching singing with the discipline of an athlete. Behind the scenes, he also faced personal challenges. Mathis openly acknowledged struggles with addiction later in life, reflecting with honesty and maturity on the pressures and difficulties that come with enduring fame. Johnny Mathis's legacy is defined not by scandal, but by the extraordinary resilience required to maintain dignity in an industry that often ignores the humanity of its stars. He carried the weight of cultural expectations, the pressure of being a black romantic icon in mid-century America, and the burden of protecting private truths in a world that demanded constant transparency. His story stands as a testament to the quiet courage it takes to hold on to one's identity while offering the world a voice that remains unforgettable. Paul Winfield. Paul Winfield was one of Hollywood's most distinguished and versatile actors, a performer whose deep voice and quiet intensity set him apart from his peers. Born in 1939, he rose to prominence with roles in Sounder 1972, Roots 1977, The Terminator 1984, and dozens of television dramas. His portrayal of Nathan Lee Morgan in Sounder earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, making him one of the first black men in history to be honored in that category. Critics praised his ability to convey dignity, vulnerability, and strength all at once, turning him into a beloved figure across stage, film, and television. But as his star rose, Paul Winfield quietly carried emotional burdens. The public never fully saw burdens shaped by the era, the industry, and the expectations placed on black actors at the time. Throughout his career, Winfield maintained a calm professionalism, rarely discussing his private life. Hollywood in the 1970s and 1980s was often unkind to performers who didn't fit conventional molds, especially black actors who already faced limited opportunities. Winfield learned early that certain truths, particularly those concerning personal identity, were safer kept behind closed doors. He poured himself into his craft, instead earning an Emmy in 1995 and building a resume that spanned genres, generations, and audiences. Do you think actors like Paul Winfield could have lived more openly if Hollywood had offered them the same freedom it gives stars today? For many viewers who admired his work, the answer feels painfully obvious. Behind the scenes, Winfield shared a long, committed relationship with architect Charles Gillen Jr., a partnership that lasted nearly 30 years but remained largely unknown to the public until later in his life and after his passing. Colleagues recalled how deeply the two cared for each other and how they quietly built a life together away from the spotlight. For Winfield, privacy was both a shield and a necessity. The entertainment industry of his time often demanded silence from actors whose personal lives did not align with the roles they were expected to play. That silence, while protective, came with emotional cost. Paul Winfield passed away in 2004 at age 64, leaving behind a legacy of exceptional performances that continue to resonate with audiences. Only after his death did many fans learn about the private life he guarded so carefully and the quiet love story that sustained him for decades. His story reflects a painful truth shared by many black Hollywood legends. Extraordinary talent often exists alongside hidden battles. Battles carried with grace, strength, and a silence shaped by the times. Howard Rollins. Howard Rollins was one of the most compelling actors of his generation. A performer whose quiet intensity and razor-sharp emotional depth captivated audiences from the start. Born in 1950 in Baltimore, Rollins first gained national attention for his role as Coalhouse Walker Jr. in Milos Forman's 1981 film Ragtime. His performance earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor and a Golden Globe nomination, marking him as one of Hollywood's most promising new talents. Soon after, he solidified his place in American television history through the hit crime drama In the Heat of the Night, where he portrayed Virgil Tibbs with remarkable nuance and dignity. Yet behind this rising career was a man struggling with pressures he never felt safe discussing openly, a man who carried personal battles in silence during a time when Hollywood offered little empathy. Rollins was a private, thoughtful person, but that privacy was often misunderstood by an industry that demanded perfection while offering little compassion. As a black actor navigating the 1980s and early 1990s, he faced intense scrutiny, limited roles, and constant pressure to represent his race with flawless professionalism. These expectations added weight to the emotional burdens he was already carrying. By the mid-1980s, Rollins began battling addiction, an issue he acknowledged publicly in interviews while seeking treatment several times. He wanted recovery, stability, and respect. Yet Hollywood often responds to vulnerability with punishment rather than support. As Rollins struggled, the industry's response was harsh. He was written off in the heat of the night after legal troubles and ongoing health challenges. Despite this, he continued to work whenever new opportunities arose, appearing in television films and stage productions. Friends and castmates later recalled that Rollins remained warm, generous, and deeply committed to his craft even during the darkest periods of his life. Privately, he also faced medical challenges that he kept to himself, reflecting both the stigma of the era and his own desire to maintain dignity. Howard Rollins passed away in 1996 at age 46 from complications related to lymphoma. Only after his death did many people begin to understand the depth of his struggles and the emotional toll of a career shaped by silence, stigma, and the unrelenting pressures of Hollywood. Rollins left behind a legacy of powerful performances and a reminder that some of the brightest talents carried their heaviest secrets alone. Raymond St. Jacques. Raymond St. Jacques was a striking presence on screen. A tall, refined, commanding actor whose performances carried a quiet power that set him apart. Born in 1930, he became one of the first black actors in Hollywood to consistently break through stereotypical roles. His breakthrough came in 1965 when he joined the cast of the Western series Rawhide, becoming the first black actor to hold a regular role in a major TV Western, a groundbreaking achievement in a genre that had long erased black history. From there, he appeared in films such as The Comedians, 1967, Cotton Comes to Harlem, 1970, and They Live, 1988, earning admiration for his sophistication and the gravitas he brought to every role. But behind this polished exterior was a man fiercely protective of his private world, navigating an industry that demanded visibility while punishing vulnerability. St. Jacques rose to fame during a turbulent era in Hollywood when black actors were allowed in the spotlight but rarely permitted to define the narratives surrounding them. Off-screen, he cultivated an image of elegance and mystery, keeping his personal life sharply separated from his public persona. In an industry obsessed with exposure, St. Jacques chose silence, a silence that protected him but also isolated him. In a time when masculinity was rigidly policed, especially for black men, he avoided interviews that probed into personal matters and refused to let journalists shape a story he did not choose. While his on-screen career was flourishing, St. Jacques also became active behind the camera. He directed, produced, and advocated for greater representation in Hollywood, frequently speaking about the need for complex roles for black performers. Yet the more he pushed for change publicly, the more guarded he became privately. Friends and colleagues later noted that he carried emotional burdens in silence, shaped by the pressures of being a pioneering black actor navigating both racial barriers and an entertainment culture that punished anyone who strayed from rigid expectations. Raymond St. Jacques passed away in 1990 at age 60 from lymphoma. After his death, reflections on his life revealed how much he had kept to himself out of necessity, self-protection, and the social climate of his time. His legacy endures not only through his trailblazing roles, but also through the quiet strength of a man who carried truths the world was never ready to hear. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge was the kind of star Hollywood wasn't ready for, but could never forget. Born in 1922, she rose from Depression-era vaudeville stages to become one of the most electrifying performers of the 20th century. With her beauty, charisma, and exceptional talent, she commanded attention in every nightclub and film she touched. In 1954, her performance in Carmen Jones made history. She became the first black woman ever nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actress, a milestone that should have opened doors. Instead, it placed her in a spotlight filled with impossible expectations. Hollywood celebrated her talent, but refused to give her roles worthy of it, pushing her into a painful cycle, praised as a symbol, denied as a woman. Beneath the glamour, Dorothy carried private struggles and heartbreaking secrets she never fully shared. Her personal life was marked by enormous pressure. Because she worked in an era dominated by segregation, Dorothy faced discrimination even at the peak of her fame. Hotels that featured her as their star attraction often refused to let her stay overnight. She was scrutinized for every relationship, including her marriage to dancer Harold Nicholas, which was troubled by infidelity and the emotional strain of raising a daughter with severe developmental disabilities. Financial manipulation by managers and systemic racism prevented her from securing long-term stability. Do you think Dorothy Dandridge could have reached her full potential if Hollywood had offered her the same opportunities given to her white counterparts? It is a question that haunts her legacy and highlights the injustice she lived through. The later years of Dorothy's life grew increasingly difficult. Despite critical acclaim, roles dried up. She fought legal battles over her finances, survived emotionally abusive relationships, and attempted to rebuild her career through nightclub performances. Behind her radiant performances, she struggled with anxiety, depression, and financial ruin, challenges she rarely spoke about publicly. Each setback pushed her further from the Hollywood dream she had worked so hard to achieve. Dorothy Dandridge died in 1965 at age 42, under circumstances still debated, officially ruled an accidental overdose, though heart failure was also cited in early reports. Only after her passing did the world begin to uncover the painful truths she carried, the professional compromises, the discrimination, the heartbreak, and the emotional weight she bore alone. Her legacy shines as brightly as ever, but the secrets she endured reveal a woman whose brilliance was matched only by her resilience. Bernie Casey. Bernie Casey was a rare kind of Hollywood figure, strong, intellectual, dignified, and impossible to overlook. Born in 1939 in West Virginia and raised in Ohio, he first captured national attention on the football field rather than the big screen. A gifted athlete, he became a first-round NFL draft pick, playing wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers and later the Los Angeles Rams. His 1967 Pro Bowl season showcased his natural talent, but even then, Casey stood apart from other players. He was a painter, a poet, and a deep thinker, an artist trapped inside an athlete's body waiting for the right moment to emerge. When he retired from football and turned toward acting, Hollywood quickly recognized the same magnetic presence the sports world had witnessed for years. Casey's transition into film and television was seamless. Over the next 4 decades, he appeared in more than 40 movies and TV projects, including Cleopatra Jones, 1973, Cornbread Earl and Me, 1975, Revenge of the Nerds, 1984, and the James Bond film Never Say Never Again, 1983, where he portrayed the sharp, commanding CIA agent Felix Leiter. Critics and audiences alike admired his ability to bring quiet strength to every character he played. He understood how to fill a scene with power without raising his voice. Despite this screen presence, Casey guarded his personal life with unwavering discipline. He rarely granted interviews, avoided scandal, and kept his private world firmly separated from Hollywood's intrusive lights. This deliberate privacy shaped much of Casey's life. Unlike many actors who relied on publicity to stay in the spotlight, he let his work speak for itself. In addition to acting, he painted professionally published poetry and remained deeply engaged in the arts. Colleagues described him as introspective and thoughtful, someone who carried his burdens silently and refused to let fame define him. That self-containment made him both fascinating and enigmatic, a man whose emotional world was known only to a select few. His artistic ambitions extended far beyond film, yet he spoke of them sparingly, preferring expression to explanation. Bernie Casey passed away in 2017 at 78 years old following complications from a brief illness. Because he lived so privately, details about his final years and any personal struggles he may have endured remained largely unknown to the public. In death as in life, Bernie Casey remained a man of quiet dignity. His legacy endures not only through his film roles and artwork, but through the air of mystery that always surrounded him, a reminder that some legends leave behind as much silence as they do brilliance. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the most versatile entertainers in American history. A singer, dancer, actor, comedian, and instrumentalist whose talent seemed limitless. Born in 1925 into a family of performers, he practically grew up on stage mastering tap dance and singing before he could read. By the 1950s and 1960s, Sammy had become a global sensation and a core member of the legendary Rat Pack alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. He broke barriers at every turn, performing in venues that still refused service to black patrons and fighting for civil rights through the sheer force of his presence. Yet behind the swagger, charm, and quick wit was a man carrying private struggles shaped by racism. The pressure of fame and inner conflicts he rarely addressed publicly. Davis faced more contradictions than most stars of his time. He was a black man embraced by white Hollywood during an era when segregation was still the law in parts of the country. His high-profile romance with actress Kim Novak in the late 1950s reportedly brought threats from powerful figures who believed such a relationship could not be allowed. Later, his marriage to Swedish actress May Britt sparked national outrage, hate mail, and even canceled bookings. Sammy wanted love and normalcy, but the world he lived in insisted on turning his personal life into controversy. The pressures of navigating interracial relationships, public expectations, and political backlash shaped a private world filled with tension and unspoken pain. Behind closed doors, Davis wrestled with his identity on multiple fronts. His 1954 car accident, which cost him an eye, led him toward Judaism, a faith he embraced deeply, but one that also added layers of public judgment and personal introspection. Friends and biographers have spoken about his complicated emotional life, suggesting that he often felt torn between the man he wanted to be and the persona he had to project. Hollywood celebrated his brilliance, but it also demanded silence about anything that didn't fit the image of a flawless, indefatigable showman. Sammy Davis Jr. died in 1990, at 64 years old, leaving behind a career that spanned more than 6 decades. Only after his death did the public gain a fuller picture of the emotional burdens he carried, the racism he endured privately, the relationships strained by public scrutiny, and the personal identity struggles he rarely voiced. His legacy remains one of astonishing talent, cultural impact, and resilience. Yet the depth of his private battles reminds us that even the world's greatest showman lived with truths he never felt free to share. Ethel Waters. Ethel Waters was one of the earliest and most influential black superstars in American entertainment. A woman whose voice and presence shaped the future of jazz, blues, radio, and Hollywood long before the world was ready to acknowledge her brilliance. Born in 1896 in poverty, she rose from difficult beginnings to become a major Broadway and film star by the 1920s and 1930s. Her haunting performances in songs like Stormy Weather, Am I Blue, and His Eye is on the Sparrow carried an emotional power that mesmerized audiences across racial lines. She became the second African-American ever nominated for an Academy Award for her role in Pinky 1949, a groundbreaking achievement in a segregated era. But behind the applause, Waters lived a complex private life shaped by trauma, resilience, and quiet secrets she rarely put into words. In the early 1920s, Waters shared a home and reportedly a romantic partnership with dancer Ethel Williams. Many historians believe this relationship shaped some of the most emotionally charged performances of her career. But in an era when being black and queer was both dangerous and life-threatening, personal truth was something she kept hidden. Waters moved through a world that demanded silence from anyone who didn't conform to society's expectations. Her early relationships, both with women and men, were complicated by the pressures of survival in an entertainment industry rife with exploitation, racism, and rigid public morality. These intimate parts of her life remained unspoken, buried beneath the glow of success and the demands of fame. As Waters aged, her personal struggles continued to mount. Financial hardships, shifting public tastes, and declining health weighed heavily on her. In the 1950s, she entered a new chapter by joining the Billy Graham Crusade, performing gospel music and sharing testimonies about her difficult past. Although her later religious life brought her comfort, it also meant she distanced herself from certain chapters of her earlier identity. The Hollywood system that once celebrated her talent also contributed to her isolation, offering few roles for aging Black actresses and even fewer spaces where she felt safe to speak her truth openly. Ethel Waters passed away in 1977 at 80 years old, leaving behind an extraordinary artistic legacy, but also deeply personal stories she never fully shared. Only through historical research letters and testimonies have pieces of her hidden life come into focus. Her journey reflects the emotional burdens faced by many early Black entertainers who lived in silence, protecting their truth in a world not yet prepared to understand it. Ethel Waters' shattered barriers changed American culture and carried with her private battles that remained concealed long after the final curtain fell. Roxy Roker. Roxy Roker was a quiet trailblazer in Hollywood, an actress whose warmth, grace, and courage helped change American television forever. Born in Miami in 1929 and raised in Brooklyn, she began her career on the stage, earning acclaim for her work with the Negro Ensemble Company and winning an Obie Award for her performance in The River Niger 1973. Her breakthrough came soon after, when she was cast as Helen Willis on the groundbreaking sitcom The Jeffersons. The show, which aired from 1975 to 1985, became one of the most influential series in television history, and Roxy's role made history in its own right. She portrayed one half of one of TV's first sustained interracial married couples, a representation that pushed boundaries during a time when such relationships still sparked controversy across America. What audiences didn't know was that Roker's on-screen marriage reflected her real life. In 1962, she married Cy Kravitz, a white Jewish filmmaker, a union that challenged social expectations and racial tensions of the era. While the marriage was a deep source of love and partnership, it also exposed the couple to hostility and prejudice, especially in the early civil rights years. Roker rarely spoke publicly about these pressures, focusing instead on raising their son, future musician Lenny Kravitz, and on building a career that required constant professionalism. Behind the smile that charmed millions was a woman navigating the emotional weight of being a public symbol at a time when America was still deeply divided. As her career grew, so did the demands placed on her. Hollywood offered limited roles for Black actresses, especially those who exuded intelligence and maturity rather than stereotype. Roker often accepted parts that were available rather than parts that reflected the range of her talent. She maintained her dignity through these challenges, embodying the resilience of many Black actresses who paved the way for future generations. Her personal life, however, grew increasingly complex. Her marriage eventually ended, and she raised her son during a period marked by professional pressures and personal transitions, subjects she rarely addressed in interviews but which shaped her life profoundly. Roxy Roker passed away in 1995 at age 66 from breast cancer. In the years since, details about her struggles, sacrifices, and the challenges of navigating interracial marriage in mid-century America have become more widely understood through the memoirs of her son and accounts from friends. Roker left behind a legacy of barrier-breaking representation and quiet strength, and a reminder that some of the most important cultural pioneers carried personal battles the world never fully saw. Alvin Ailey. Alvin Ailey was one of the most transformative figures in American art. A choreographer whose work reshaped modern dance and gave voice to Black experiences long overlooked on the nation's stages. Born in Texas in 1931 and raised during the Jim Crow era, Ailey grew up surrounded by the hardship music and spiritual traditions that would later define his work. When he founded the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater in 1958, he sought not only to innovate movement, but to capture the emotional truth of an entire community. His masterpiece, Revelations 1960, became the most performed modern dance work in the world, an electrifying blend of sorrow, joy, resistance, and rebirth. To audiences, Ailey was a visionary, a pioneer, a cultural historian. But privately, he was a man carrying emotional struggles he could not safely share. Behind his brilliance was a life shaped by silence. Ailey lived during an era when being a black gay man invited relentless discrimination, social, professional, and even legal. He kept his sexuality private not out of shame, but because he knew the industry he loved could punish him for simply being himself. The strain of hiding pieces of his identity collided with a demanding career that required constant travel, creative output, and leadership. This internal pressure contributed to periods of depression, and in the 1960s and 1970s, Ailey was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a condition little understood at the time. He continued working through emotional turmoil, choreographing pieces filled with longing, spirituality, and human vulnerability, art that served as his voice when words felt too dangerous. As his company expanded internationally, Ailey became a global ambassador of culture, but the public celebration rarely reflected his private reality. In the 1980s, at the height of the AIDS crisis, he faced an additional burden. The stigma surrounding the disease and the fear it created within the artistic community was enormous. When Ailey was hospitalized near the end of his life, he reportedly requested that the cause of death be listed as a blood disorder to protect his family, his legacy, and his dancers from the prejudice of the era. This heartbreaking choice reflected the world he lived, in a world where truth could cost everything. Alvin Ailey passed away in 1989 at 58 years old, leaving behind a company that continues to honor his mission, telling the full emotional story of the African American experience. Only years after his death did the public gain a clearer understanding of the private battles he carried: the mental illness, the stigma, the weight of secrecy. His legacy endures in every dancer who steps onto a stage with courage, and in every audience member moved by the power of truth expressed through art. Florence Ballard. Florence Ballard was the powerful, passionate heart of the Supremes long before the world knew the name Diana Ross. Born in Detroit in 1943, she grew up surrounded by the music that would later define Motown's golden age. As one of the group's founding members, Ballard possessed a rich contralto voice that shaped the early sound of the Supremes, helping the trio rise from local talents to one of the best-selling girl groups of all time, with more than a dozen #1 hits. But while the world saw glamour, sparkling gowns, and chart-topping success, Florence lived a different story behind the scenes, a story marked by unspoken pain and hidden struggles that followed her throughout her short life. As Motown grew more commercially ambitious, pressures inside the group intensified. By the mid-1960s, management began pushing Diana Ross into the spotlight, reshaping the Supremes' image in ways that left Florence increasingly sidelined. Former bandmates and Motown insiders later described how she endured professional disappointment, emotional turmoil, and a growing sense of invisibility within the group she helped create. She confronted creative conflicts, grueling touring schedules, and decisions she had little power to influence. These pressures eventually took a heavy toll. Meanwhile, a traumatic assault earlier in her life, something she rarely discussed publicly, left deep emotional scars she carried in silence. Florence's confidence began to erode even as she tried desperately to hold on to the dream she had built. In 1967, Ballard was removed from the Supremes, a decision that changed the course of her life. Her departure was followed by legal disputes with Motown, financial instability, and struggles with depression. She attempted a solo career with ABC Records, but without the strong promotional engine she once had, behind her success remained elusive. Interviews during this period revealed a woman trying to reclaim her voice while fighting the shadows of a music industry that often discarded the very artists who built it. Friends later recalled that Florence's laughter and spirit remained intact, but her life had become a quiet battle for stability, dignity, and recognition. Florence Ballard died in 1976 at 32 years old from cardiac arrest, leaving behind 3 young daughters and countless questions about what might have been. Only after her death did the public begin to understand the extent of the hardships she had endured, her financial struggles, the loss of artistic control, and the emotional wounds she kept hidden. Over time, books, documentaries, and interviews have painted a fuller picture of her life, a founding Supremes member whose voice and passion helped create a cultural phenomenon, yet who carried private pain the world never truly saw. Florence Ballard's legacy lives in the music, the memories, and the truth that finally emerged after she was gone. The lives of these remarkable artists remind us that brilliance often walks hand in hand with burdens the world never sees. Their talent shaped generations, yet their struggles were pushed into silence by the pressures of Hollywood society and the eras they lived through. At Legends of Black Excellence, we honor not only their achievements, but the humanity behind the spotlight. The triumphs, the pain, and the truths revealed only with time. Now we turn it over to you. Which of these untold stories challenges your understanding of fame the most, and why? Let the conversation begin.